Hello and welcome. In this tutorial I'm going to show you how you can draft this vintage inspired tunic using just 5 measurements. It's a great way of dipping your finger into drafting your own garments. You don't need a pattern or block. All you need to do is measure yourself and a piece of paper. This type of pattern cutting is used in many countries. It's got a long, rich history. This example is India, but you'll find it in lots of different countries, and it's a great way of basically making garments which fit yourself. You can see it's a really lovely loose style, so perfect for summer, and it can be made for any body. I'm going to show you how to measure yourself and then the full drafting process to create the whole tunic. Before we get started, if you love pattern cutting and you love sewing and want to make your own clothes, why not have a look in the description to find out how you can learn to make your perfect wardrobe with me. Now let's get started. The first thing you need to do is measure yourself, and I'm going to show it on myself and then relate how it actually looks like on the blouse. So this is really like drafting a really basic bodice block, but everything is made out of geometric shapes rather than with drawing in curves. The only curve is really our neckline, and that is completely up to you. So the first thing we need to do is measure from shoulder to shoulder. So that's a measurement we don't always really use, but you measure from where your armhole normally would sit on a style like that. So you can see this is not a very tight shoulder. It's sort of nearly a drop shoulder, so you don't want it too high because that's going to interfere. So the way you would wear a shirt or something. So you measure across there and record your measurement from that. Then we can already take our second measurement, which is from that point down to your cuff, which is your sleeve length. So measurement number 1 is just across from shoulder edge to shoulder edge, and then measurement 2 is just your sleeve length from the top, and that's of course up to taste. The third measurement is also up to your taste, which is the length of how you want this blouse or tunic to sit. So again, you can use if you put an existing tunic you like or blouse, you can measure it, and we want to measure the high shoulder point, which is sort of where your shoulder meets your neckline, and you measure down again however you want, how you want it to be, and that's again, it's this point down. And of course normally our shoulders are sloped. This one is actually completely straight, so you don't have to be exactly at the high shoulder point. The next one, which is a really important measurement for any style like this, is your bust measurement. So what we want is our relaxed bust measurement. Like whenever you're measuring, try to keep it straight and balanced, so it's around your widest point of your bust. And you can see this has quite a lot of ease. This is not a very tight garment. It's got lots of design ease. It's quite quite airy, quite nice for summer. So take your bust measurement plus 10 centimeter, which is 4 inches overall. So you can literally just measure yourself and then add 10 centimeters or 4 inches more. The last measurement is to measure your armhole really tight. So essentially to measure around as tight as you can be, roughly where you've measured the edge of your shoulders. You can see where I measured your shoulder. I'm going to measure my really tight armholes. You can see it's cutting myself off, and then if you slide that down, that should become a really comfortable sleeve. So around your top arm it should be a nice comfortable sleeve, and then it should be just enough to sort of go around your arm right at the top. And that's going to be our sleeve, because our sleeve hasn't got a sleeve head. It's literally a tube. So that's why we need it to go just around our arm, right at the top where it meets our armhole and shoulder. And then it should slide down and have like a nice amount. You can see that's a nice upper arm sleeve here. And then of course we're adding our comfort and wearing ease, so it's actually a usable armhole, that gets added to the gusset. And that's how we can get away with measuring really tighter on our armhole. So in a way, normally we always say, yes, you know, add a little bit of space. In this case, as tight, in a way, as tight as you can get it around your upper armhole, as long as it's a nice upper arm sleeve. So again, what you can do if you're not quite sure about how this works, if you have a blouse or tunic, you can just measure around your upper arm measurements, so it slides easily up and down. And of course, if you wear, for example, a very big pecs, then you know it might change slightly. But for most of us, it's basically tight across our sort of where the arm meets our armhole on a garment, where it meets our body, and then to slide it down to make sure you got enough design ease to make it a comfortable sleeve. And that's all the measurements we need. So take these 5 measurements, note them down, and then we can get to drafting. Let's draft the tunic. We're going to start with drafting the front bodice. And of course, the front bodice and the back bodice for this style are identical. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of a shortcut. I'm going to draw out the whole front using my measurements, but then I'm going to draw my center front and use it as a cutting line, so I can later on use it as a fold line, at the same time draw my 2 different necklines in. So it's basically using shortcuts to save time and also save paper, because I don't need a whole front and I don't need a whole back because we unfold. Piece number 1, and the first measurement I need to know from a use from earlier is my shoulder width, which is in my case so that is the same at the hem, which I'm drawing first. I'm also going to mark the center, which is of course my center back and center front. And then I'm using my pattern master to, again, as usual, make sure I've got a perfectly squared line. So center back, center front. One side. Two sides. Once I've started with a perfectly straight of grain, 90 degree, I can now stand this up. And if you want to be super precise, you can actually halfway up again, check. Can you see I've done something completely wrong? So let me double check again. I've marked this wrong. Okay. What have I done here? Needs to be. Okay, I can't, sorry, I apologize. I just marked my center front wrong. This is why it's always really important to double check as you're going along. Especially if you're something which you might have done a few times, or if, like me, you're trying to talk while drawing. It's really easy to get things wrong, and that's why it's always really important to double check, because that's when you straight away find out your mistakes and you can correct them. I basically divided it wrongly. Anyway, so now I've got my center front, which is going to be on the fold, and I'm going to cut it apart on that line, and then this is going to be my center back on the fold. So I'm basically just saving time by drawing both my front and the back out. I'm now going to move up a bit, and I'm going to draw in my body length, so the length of my top. And of course that is up to your taste again and your individual measurements, but you just mark it this is going to be our biggest pattern piece. And if you wanted to, again, you could just draw it out on the fabric, and then also, actually this is a perfect pattern for drawing out the pattern fabric. You just draw it out on the fabric with chalk, using your right angles, and your straight of grain, pulling thread maybe, and then you can just maybe just make a template for only the neck and draw it on. So this is my front and back bodice. I'm going to add seam allowance on straight away. And I'm doing my normal seam allowance for all of them, which is 1 centimeter, but of course you use whatever is, what you like sewing with. And if it's your first one, maybe make it a little bit wider so you can easily amend it. The last thing I now need to do is adding my neckline. So these are actually 2 pattern pieces. I've just drawn them as one to save on time. So this is my front, so number 1, and I'm going to cut 1 on fold, and then this my back, number 2, that's number 2, and I'm going to cut again 1 on the fold. Now you need to draw on your neckline quickly. This is where we're going away from pure geometric, and of course that neckline is completely up to you. I'm going to use my basic bodice block necklines. Where is my front? And here's my back. You can see these are my really old blocks I've amended over the years. So for my back, I'm going to use it as a guideline, because of course it's at the neck, it's not going to be perfect because this is using a convention shoulder. So I'm just roughly going to sketch it in, and then in a minute I'm going to cut it apart and lay them together and make sure they're a nice line when they come together. But this is just, I know this follows my neck roughly, this will fit my neckline. And then of course you can do your buttonhole access, you can do whatever method you want. On the pattern cutting school there's 3 ways of doing really nice button stands like that, especially if you want to maybe add a little pleat at the bottom, so you could add these as well. I'm now going to cut this out and apart so I can match up my necklines. So you can see I've pinned my back and front together, and can you see now my necks of course don't match. So what I can do now is just basically draw in my neck to suit me, and we don't want this too tight, so I'm actually going with my back neck measurement so it's slightly wider, and then I can use my pattern master to make sure this is completely round and lovely and matched up. And then I'm going to also use my pattern master to add my seam allowance. I'm adding my normal one, and of course we will have a whole video on how to finish everything and the different finishing options you can use. So I'm adding a normal seam allowance. You can also add a narrower seam allowance on a neckline like that, especially if you're using, for example, binding. So a narrower seam allowance would be, in my case, the width of my foot, which is 0.7. So it's a little bit harder to draw because it's under a centimeter, but I think my other ruler has that measurement, so I can do that. And I'm just squaring my center front to make sure. And I'm using the neckline, of course, from the original style, but you can use any neckline you want. So if you don't want this type of measurement, neckline, you can also, you know, for example, you could do one at the back like that, and in the front you could do it sort of 1930 style neckline if you wanted. What you basically need to do is big enough to get your head in. So you could also do a V-neck if you wanted to, and then maybe add a little panel like that to stabilize it. It's up to you. Have a look. There is no there's no shortage of ideas. Just big enough to get your head in. That's all that matters. So I've now got my pieces finished. So this is our bodice done, number pattern 1 and 2. Let's draw our side panels, and they start basically at where roughly our bust is, or in this case where basically half our armhole measurement is. So you don't need a big piece of paper for this, because we're only drawing the side panels, and the side panel consists out of 1, 2, 3 and 4, which I didn't actually draw on, and they're all identical. So what they are basically are, if you think about up here, that was our shoulder width, and what we now want to do across here is our bust measurement, which is our bust plus 10 centimeters. So what we need to do first of all is some maths, joy of joy. So what we need to do is do our bust plus our included ease, so our full measurement from earlier, minus our shoulder measurement. And in my case, that is my bust measurement for the front, so it's half your full bust measurement. So for the front and back again are identical in this style. So in my case it's 50 centimeters, which includes my ease, minus 38 centimeters, which is my shoulder measurement, and that measures 12 centimeters. So you take your whole bust measurement, including whatever ease you added, which is a minimum of 10 centimeters or 4 inches, half of it, because we're of course doing front and back, and then you take away your shoulder, and that gives you the measurement for both of the front or both of the back. So again, we need to divide this by 2, and that equals 6 centimeters. So hope that made sense. If it doesn't, do let me know in the comments and I will be happy to clarify. But that basically gives us the sort of width we need here, here and here and here to widen this blouse to go over our bust. So all we now need to do is draw that on. So I'm going to draw a straight line, and this time really concentrate on getting it completely straight. And then I'm going to square across at the bottom, again paying lots of attention. I've got a 90-degree angle, and now I can mark the width of this. So I'm actually going to, because this is a very long piece, I'm going to mark it a few times like this, and then draw it on. And again, I'm going to actually check it against the bottom. So I got a strip like this. I now need to work out, of course, how long this is, because it sits like this at the bottom, and then of course I don't want to go all the way. Where I wanted to hit is, if I quickly go back to my proper video, can you see it basically goes up to where my sleeve ends. So I now need to use my sleeve measurement, which is the tight armhole measurement or upper arm measurement, and you divide it by half and you mark half of it on here. All I have to do now is just measure this measurement and transfer it to here and square across. Now the big question is, of course, at the moment it's completely straight. However, a lot of us, our hip measurement, especially if you want to make it wider, is actually bigger than our bust measurement. So if I show you a blouse again, if I move it up, and I think it's for most of us, it's actually for a lot of us, we want it to be loose around the hip. If this is too tight around the hip, it will be really unflattering. So can you see what I've done the original blouses? It's got a slit, so that will allow it to fall nicely. And they also, these panels can be straight or they can be slightly flared. So what you can do if you, for example, don't want the slit too high, but you want it to fall really nicely, is what we can do is we lightly change the shape of the panel, and it's super easy. If you want to have a little bit more room for your hips, all you do is basically just, for example, add a little bit to each side. So even if I'm adding 0.5 centimeter to the side, that overall will be 4 centimeters. So that's another 1.5 inches roughly. So you can just do it like that, and then all you have to do is go up just a mil or two so you can square it out and curve it back gently, and then just double check the measurement is still identical, like this. So I'm just basically holding my measurement at the top, and then I'm pivoting across. And it just brings it up, like, again, we're talking mils here. And I'm, of course, using pens. You should be using a lovely sharp pencil. You can play around with that. So then also you can add the slit wherever you want to. So this is a slit here. So that should hopefully give you the extra space you need to have a flattering, breezy blouse rather than one which is bunching up around your hip, which you really don't want. And this is piece number 3, which is all the same, which I always love. And because I've marked a notch there, so this is going to be my side, this is going to be my front back seam. Then you can just add your seam allowance everywhere. So this is the sort of the side panels, and we're going to cut 2 pairs or 4 because they're identical. It's piece number 3, and I've the straight of grain on here. It's just down the center. Of course, on the last 2 pieces, the straight of grain is just parallel to our center front and center back as usual. So 3 pattern pieces done. I'm going to cut this out now. The next pattern piece we're going to draft is the sleeve, which is number 4. The sleeve, as I said when we are measuring, is a complete tube. So another lovely geometric piece to draft. So what you need to do is take your measurement from your last measurement we did around the armholes, the really tight measurement. We only need half of it because, of course, what we can do is fold our fabric along our top line because we only got seam at the bottom. So I'm only going to draw off half and then cut it out on fold. So take that measurement and then divide it by half. And that's going to be the width. Next, we're going to draw in the length. Again, as I said, 90 degrees. So I'm actually now standing up to make sure I get this right. And it's always, I think, often when you're drawing squares, it seems really straightforward. But if a curve is slightly, a mill down or up in the curve, it doesn't show. If your square is just 1 degree out, it's going to be noticeable at the other end. So I'm extending my lines. So this measurement is half my armhole. And then this, of course, is my sleeve length, which is up to you. And I'm just off the screen, but all I'm doing is just squaring it across. And that is my cuff. Then this is going to be my fold line, which is also my straight of frame. All I have to do is add seam allowance and I'm done. So this is number 4, which is a sleeve. And we're going to cut 1 pair, and it's on fold, of course. Now you've got all the pattern pieces you need to make this blouse, and of course I'd love you to join me in our summer draft and sew along. If you make this tunic, find out in the description how you can join in, share it on Instagram or email me, and then by the end of the summer I will host a live party here on YouTube to show off all your makes and also hopefully mine. That's it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.